Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock, so I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. There are 7 board members present. I will take a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Motion passes 7-0.
Next is item 3A, public comment. Casey, are there any public comments this evening?
There are not.
Okay. As a reminder, anyone wishing to submit public comment should do so via the online form ahead of the meeting. Okay, next is the consent agenda. Items listed on the consent agenda are considered by the Board of Education to be routine business items. Approval of the items may be made by a single motion, second, a majority vote, with no separate discussion of any item listed. Should a member of the board desire to discuss any item at his or her request, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. What are the wishes of the board?
I would move for approval of the consent agenda as submitted.
Second.
Okay. And as always, thank you for the generous donations from our community partners, and thank you for the support of our schools.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, we are moving right on to board reports as the first thing this evening. Leslie, Flint Hills Technical College.
I was on vacation.
Oh, great.
I've never missed a school board meeting, and that was the first Tech College board meeting I missed, but I was on vacation.
Okay,
So, sorry.
that's okay, thank you. And then Rec Commission.
A lot happened with the Rec Commission. Monday night, we approved the retirement of our executive director, Tom McElvoy, as of January 1st. He'll be moving on. And then we created a special committee to review the process of establishing an executive director search and getting that ready. On that committee will be myself, Mike Helbert, Aaron Hammond, Stephanie Drescher, both our staffers at the Rec Commission, and then two citizen appointees, Leon Ramirez and Christian Kiesler. We also started the discussion about doing our own facility needs study as a Rec Commission, and, you know, like what we did here, create a list of things we need to improve, parks, and then those deferred maintenance items and stuff that kind of sneak up on you and prioritize them. And then I think Jamie will have some information maybe for the steering committee.
It's always hard to remember because there's so many steering committee meetings, but we are really excited to move forward in our recommendation for a sales tax vote in March for a $53 million project for a new rec center. Our hope is that not only will we be able to build a new facility at Champions Landing, but we'll also be able to do some work at Lee Barron, so that way we can make sure that we're still serving every part of our community. And then we also hope to do some work out at DuBois soccer fields to upgrade those fields as well. So I know that the whole committee was very excited about where we landed, and I think the community support and the community interest has been really tremendous. We've had a lot of really great attendance at all of our meetings. So excited to start moving forward.
Great, I'm excited too. I saw some of the pictures of what y'all are hoping to have, and it looks great. Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item is 7A, construction update from McCowan Gordon.
Mr. Eric Holstein, McCown Gordon Senior Project Manager, is here to talk about William Allen White.
This presentation, kind of like we always do, just showing a real quick schedule, and it's, you know, we're getting down to the end here. It's kind of bittersweet after you think back to when we were first brought on back in 2018. So we've been collaborating on these projects with you and your design partner in HGK for quite some time now. It's been enjoyable, and Dr. Harder and I had a meeting today, and we were just talking about how I truly appreciate the collaboration that your staff and your administrators bring and have brought to the construction process. It's been a fun interaction, and I hope they feel the same way, but they've been great to work with. And it works really well when you can bring everybody together and kind of find that happy medium to make everybody's life a little easier. So things are tracking really well at William Allen White as far as schedule goes. I'll touch some more on that after we get to the pictures. So Casey, if I could have you go to the photos. So the top left photo is of the new multi-purpose room. So the brick facade is ongoing. Hopefully we'll be finished up towards the end of next week, worst case. We've had a really good stint of weather here, and we'll continue through right before the cold breaks. Hopefully we'll be done with the majority of the exterior site work. But the brick match, I don't know if you've had a chance to drive by, but it hasn't all been washed down yet. They'll probably start that, not next week, but the week after, but the color match looks really, really well. So it's blended nicely. The bottom left corner is just of the new main hallway that connects the new multi-purpose room to the existing building there. And then the right bottom picture is of the new multi-purpose room, and up on the wall, that will be where the new sound panels go. So there's insulation behind those. Sound panels should show up next week. We'll paint those and get those hung. And then just that upper right corner is kind of a quick picture into the mechanical room there on the left. And then on the right is the entry into the new music room. So as far as things happening over there, sanitary sewer and the grease interceptor for the new kitchen tie-ins, that is being completed this week. Sidewalks will start shortly after, hopefully next week on that south side, and we'll kind of work our way around to the east and then the north once the masonry is all complete. Kitchen equipment install started this week, so kitchen equipment, the new stuff is shown up, and then over Christmas break is the plan. We'll go in the existing kitchen, pull that equipment, put it in the new kitchen. The custom stainless tops or tables that go in that kitchen were field measured, and so hopefully within the next couple of weeks they'll show up and be installed. The music casework is scheduled for mid-December, so as soon as we get that room will be completed and we'll get that installed. And then the Kansas Fire Marshal, our inspection is set up for November 12th. So yeah, fingers crossed, Leslie, that's right. So we'll have that. That'll give us a little bit of a buffer time too, because really the goal is we're going to turn it over winter break to y'all. So that's ahead of schedule. So with that fire marshal inspection mid-November, that gives us a little bit of that buffer in case he or she does find something as they're walking through. But yeah, that's kind of the exciting news. We're planning to do some other things during winter break, so the mural repairs, the wall repairs in the main corridors, the hope is to get that started. We've got some things from the summer work that we weren't able to get worked in just because of time constraints, that we're going to go back in a couple of those classrooms and the administration space that we enlarged and make some repairs that we know are still out there that we need to get buttoned up. But yeah, other than that, things are looking really good over there if you've had the chance to drive by. So what questions do you all have?
No questions? Okay, thanks
Okay.
so much, Eric.
Awesome. All right, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next is item 8A, our quarterly report of the strategic plan.
Okay, we are excited. Pam Stranathan cannot be with us tonight, so I'm going to take her slides. This is the third quarterly report that provides a current snapshot of the progress that the district is making on the priorities and goals of our strategic plan. The student data that will be reviewed tonight is summative, so it reflects how the students performed at that time. When teachers, principals, and staff review the results, sometimes they indicate the results align perfectly with what they expect students to be doing. Others may say that is not what they expected, and then others are excited because students perform better. So it's just a little bit all over the place. We are also sensitive to the fact that our teachers, principals, and all educators work really hard, and it's summarized in this snapshot. So everybody's working hard to provide high-quality instruction and support so they can achieve at the highest level. The quarterly report takes weeks for DST to organize in a manner that is interpreted consistently by different people. I will tell you that we will look at tables in different ways and how we're explaining this because we want to make sure that whatever we're putting out there is easily understood. And we want to make sure that if different people are looking at that, we try to make sure that the explanations are broad enough that we're covering a grade level and explaining that well, but also providing enough details so that makes sense. We also make sure that the tables, reports, and information, they're accurate. So if you please find something, please let us know, because we want to make sure that that is accurate. The state assessments were released as we were finalizing the quarterly report, and we knew that we would not have enough time to thoroughly analyze the results for the board meeting, so we'll do a study session at the next board meeting. And then we're going to follow the presentation that's on the wall, but we're going to have you dig into the report. So we're going to get into the tables, and do not be nervous as we go through maybe the first 4 tables. We will not be going through every single table, so we want to make sure you know that. And then also appreciate the suggestion that we had question slides. So please ask your questions for every section, so that way we can talk about it right then rather than trying to remember what it was that we were talking about earlier. So with that, we will begin with Mrs. Stanley.
Good evening. Before we share with you the academic data, we wanted to provide a little information on how a student is determined to be at risk on FastBridge. FastBridge benchmarks are determined by normed assessments. And so when we have a student that's performing at the 50th percentile, then that means they're performing better than 50% of the students or lower than 50% of the students. And that's really how FastBridge looks at the success of a student. If it is a student that is at risk, they are performing at the 39th percentile or below. The data that's in our charts is sharing with you the number of students that are no longer at risk, that they are the 40th percentile and higher. We want to be sure to remember that this is just one piece of data. Just like we talked about with the progress reports at the last meeting, we don't want one piece of test score to determine whether a child's being successful or not, or whether a building is being successful or not. So it's one piece of data that we look at when we are looking at our school improvement plans and our district strategies that we need to be doing. We are also going to share some celebrations with you. Mrs. Glades and Dr. Cardula are going to point out some grade level cohorts that made more than 5% growth from last year to this year. That is amazing success. So if you think about a class that is, let's say 300 students in that class, which is a little large, but it's easy math for me, that means 15 students are now no longer at risk. That's almost an entire classroom. So we want to celebrate those grade levels that have made those kind of gains. And another piece to know, our charts are focused on the students that are not at risk. So they are that low risk and that post-secondary ready. What you don't see is the growth of all students. We have many students who are making good gains, but because of where they started, they're still at the at-risk category. And we don't want to forget their hard work and the hard work of their teachers as we look at this big picture.
Hello. So I'm glad you have your narrative, your tables in front of you, because I'm going to reference one of those starting right off. So we are going to look at table 1 on page 2. So, and I will reference some specific data there, but it is evident, we believe, that our buildings and our classrooms are consistently implementing that HMH into reading, our new ELA resource, and that's evident from our growth that we're seeing. We are seeing overall, we are seeing a positive trend in our achievement data, so we're super, super excited about that. One thing I did want to mention about the tables, because you've seen them and you'll see many more on the pages here, and we'll reference them. So Dr. Cardula did the work on those, and they're very colorful, and that it's nice to look at. So he not only is showing tables that shows grade level data, but he's colorized those so you can follow that cohort data as well. So that's on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side are those total numbers of students. So those first few tables are that's how the data is going to be represented on those. So table 1, page 2, we have several cohorts who grew over 5%, just like Judy said, specifically that 3rd grade cohort. And that's, to see that 3rd grade cohort, you're looking at the last grade level that they would be at in the fall of 2024. So pay close attention to that 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 6th grade cohort. They all grew over 5%. So we were super thrilled to see that. And those are those students, again, that are at that low risk and that post-secondary ready. So if you would take a look, another piece of data that I'm pretty excited to share with you is on page 3, table 3, because it has to do with our students with disabilities. So we saw some amazing growth in all of our cohorts. We saw all of those cohorts actually grow when we compare the fall of 2023 to the fall of 2024. In fact, we saw all of our grade levels grow except for second grade. So we're going to give them a break on that. They're just learning how to be students at school and do all those things. So, but we saw that consistent growth not only in the grade levels, but also in the cohort data. So I was excited to see that. On page 4, table 7, I'll give you a second to get there. So every group of students, both cohort and grade level, showed growth of some kind. So that's pretty impressive to be able to say that. So we did note that. Specifically, 5th grade last year to 5th grade this year saw a 4% increase in the number of students at that low risk and post-secondary ready. So again, very glad to see that and point out some of those good growth pieces. A good thing about doing the quarterly report right now is that our teaching and learning team did just finish our fall data discussions with all buildings. So it was really wonderful to hear all of the great things that they're doing and what they're seeing specifically in their classrooms and their buildings. One theme that kept coming up was the structured literacy pieces that are part of our HMH Inter-Reading. So our instructional coaches and our principals and building leaders, they truly believe that those structured literacy pieces are partly responsible for that good growth that we are seeing in our student achievement in ELA. One of the charts that I wanted to make mention, wanted to draw your attention to on that is page 3, table 4. If you take a look, and this is pretty significant, so we could not have this discussion without bringing this up. So page 3, table 4, that fall 2023 to fall 2024, if you look at nonsense words from grade 1 to grade 2, in grade 1, 24% of those students were at low risk and post-secondary ready. Grade 2, 78% were at low risk and post-secondary ready. That's just awesome. That's awesome to see and to tell you all about. So those are the strengths that we wanted to share. Along with strengths, we're going to share some challenges as well. So some of the challenges that we have discussed in our data talks and things that we're aware of that might be posing challenges to our buildings and classrooms. During our data discussions, our teachers were talking about the timing pieces of FastBridge. So all of the tests in FastBridge, aside from a reading, are timed. They have that time component that students have to demonstrate mastery in this amount of time. So what our buildings believe is that it's kind of like what Judy said. We are seeing growth, and our students are improving their achievement. They're improving their oral reading fluency. Right now, we're seeing a little more slow and accurate readers as opposed to our automaticity, those automatic readers. So still seeing growth, just it's slow. Slow and steady wins the race, right? Slow and steady wins the race. So that's kind of what our instructional coaches were sharing with us, was that we're seeing our slow and accurate readers. So another challenge that we wanted to bring forth is we've talked a lot last year about chronic absenteeism. Dr. Cargillo will talk a little bit more about it later. We're seeing some improvements there, but we still have to realize that when students are chronically absent or even absent, they're missing out on those educational opportunities, and we can't deny that fact, that when they're not in school, they're not learning, they're not having exposure to that material. So as far as next step, a lot of things that we're doing right now that are going well that we're going to continue to do. We're going to continue to consistently encourage that school attendance and that engagement piece with families and home and school. Continue the implementation of our ELA resource. It's working, so we're going to keep doing that. Also emphasizing those structured literacy pieces. Like I had told you, we had said that or heard that in a lot of our data discussions. We want to make sure to share that and emphasize those structured literacy pieces with all of our buildings to ensure that those are being emphasized. And several of our buildings said that they were going to use our data discussions that we had here at Teaching and Learning with them just as that jumping off point to have even deeper data discussions with their building level teams so that they can further identify and address those student needs. So that's what I've got for you there, but I would entertain some questions if you have any.
What questions do we have?
So I have a question on the disabled students,
yes.
them growing. Now, was it last year? Was it a reading, an English language arts resource that we approved for SPED, remember? Or was it math?
It was math.
Okay,
It was math.
okay.
It was
I just
number worlds.
wondered if
Right,
that
right,
was
right.
what
That's
had
a great
contributed.
question.
Okay,
So
okay.
we have two evidence-based resources. We have Sonday, and then we also have Language Live. We use Hegarty for our phonemic awareness. So those are all evidence-based. So those are currently being used. We did acquire Number Worlds. We used some ESSER funds to acquire Number Worlds through
Okay.
that resource
Oh,
process.
yeah, I was
Yes.
remembering a presentation.
Good memory,
but,
though.
And then my other question is about timed tests. And I know that there's nothing that we can do in this room about that. But what is the thinking in pedagogy about that? Why is it such a big deal that you have to be able to do it in this amount of time when we have more kids than ever with anxiety and time test, speaking as a parent of 2 children with severe test anxiety, causes more anxiety than anything else when they're taking a test.
Right.
So if they know they only have a certain amount of time, the teacher, no matter how hard they try, is feeling that angst as well and trying to get their kid to finish that test just a little bit faster. So why is that so important? And do families have the option, if their child has test modifications, to remove the timed factor from those kinds of tests? Is that something we're allowed to do?
So that's a
No.
great question, but I do not believe we can do those things. Some of the common testing accommodations that we have for students with disabilities might be a separate setting for the test, or maybe if there's a capability to pause FastBridge, which not saying that there is, but years ago when I was in the classroom, we had MAP testing, and there was the capability to pause that test. I don't believe we have that with FastBridge, but those are just some of the kind of accommodations or things that we might do in those cases. I honestly don't have a good answer for you on that, but I would love to know more about it. Does anyone have a good answer on that? Okay, hi, come on over, friend.
So the thought process behind the timing is that if a student is more automatic and fluent, then it frees up their brain to be able to read and comprehend. One of the issues that we're seeing with that rate on the oral reading fluency is the rate is incredibly high at many of the grade levels. First grade will do it for the first time in January, and it's double. We used to take a test many years ago, it was called DIBELS, and it was very similar, and I was a teacher at that time, and I also got very frustrated with the timing piece. Many of our students, sometimes they would go back and reread because they didn't understand the phrase. That's a good reading technique, but not when you have to read so many words in a minute. So that is very frustrating. Well, as a first grade teacher in January, they had to read 20 words per minute, which doesn't sound terrible. FastBridge requires almost 40, so it's double what we've known in the past that was already difficult for some students. FastBridge will tell you that it's because their passages are decodable. What we discovered last year in first grade as we analyzed the passages, there are words in there like animal, people, there, words that they hadn't covered yet. So it's not truly decodable. It turns out that our kids are very accurate, they're just not quite fast enough. The benchmark's just fast. But the one piece is if they're faster readers, they understand it better. That's not necessarily as accurate as what we experience as educators. I guarantee you could talk to any teacher and they will tell you that this child doesn't read very fast. But when I read to them, I understand them, it sounds fine, but they'll never make benchmark, but they may be the highest performing student in the class. And you're right, there's nothing we can do about it. So, hope that helps, Leslie.
Yep, thank you.
I have a question about Table 2, or ELL learners, and seeing, some of the numbers there aren't as robust as in the other categories. So I
Right.
was wondering, what kind of support are we offering those students, not just for FastBridge, but in general?
Right, that's a great question. And Judy, come on back up. All right, sorry.
If you remember that you approved us doing the SIOP training, the sheltered instruction, so that is our first step, because that puts tools, strategies in every teacher's hands. One of the difficulties, and I have it later on a slide, but now I don't have to say it. One of the difficulties we're finding for our second language learners is that evidence-based practice list that KSDE gave us, and we have to use those type of interventions if we're using any type of at-risk money, which is money that we're using for our strategist. There are no true identified practices or interventions that really fit our second language learners. And we are having an increase of completely non-English speaking. So that is something that we are delving into. We're trying to figure out how do we work around that, what structures can we put in place. The automatic go-to is let's translate, but that doesn't help develop that oral language development. So those are the pieces that we're looking at. As we look at that data, though, something to really remember is as a student meets a benchmark or they perform high enough in KELPA, they're no longer on that chart. So if they're getting to that low-risk category, they're going to drop off. So it's really hard to measure that. It's really about how many kids do we exit. That's actually what we should probably look at when we look at second language learners. Because technically, if they're low risk, they probably aren't going to qualify anymore. So that's another battle that we have when we're looking at data. Does that help?
Judy, this may be, so like the FastBridge benchmarks, are they set by FastBridge?
Yes.
And are they, anybody that uses FastBridge would be held to those levels?
That is a really good question. Because a school district, if they felt like it, they could go in and change the benchmarks. We have talked about that as a teaching and learning team because there's never been anything from the state that said you need to keep these benchmarks. So it becomes a little scary to know if you're comparing district to district, are we all using the right numbers? We are using what FastBridge says. And so essentially, I would say probably 50th percentile is the benchmark you're trying to get to. It's like that average number. That's what we're using. We've had lots of questions. The K-6 benchmarks were determined in 2019, so prior to the pandemic. So our students are being expected to benchmarks that were at that time. When we adopted FastBridge, it was very new, so we don't really know if the demographics look similar to ours. So are they accurate? And we don't know. I cannot tell you if other districts are sticking with that benchmark number, which is a little frustrating. When we did MAPS, you couldn't change the benchmark. This is what it was. The teaching and learning team met with some members from TASN last year to talk about it, the people that really are dug into the FastBridge, they know what they're talking about, to discuss these concerns that we had, to discuss why there are words included in the first grade passages that are not decodable, are not words that they're seeing, that are their high-frequency words. There's not a good answer. The answer we ended up getting was, well, we don't put a lot of credibility into the first grade assessment. The state requires it, so we have to put credibility into it. So we're still working through some of those pieces.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I just have a couple of questions, unless anyone else wants. Okay. So, and maybe I am not, I'll just start with this first question. So the assumption that I made, which may very well be incorrect, was that if on like second grade nonsense words, we pointed out that they have been doing really well. And that cohort has made like significant gains, which we love to see. My assumption was then that would be reflected in, for example, their CBM reading, which is much lower. And so I was wondering if you could maybe explain some of that correlation a little bit more.
I do not know how they make those correlations.
Okay.
I can just share with you that the rate is pretty high for the CBMs. And I'll go straight to fifth grade. It's almost 200 words a minute. And when you read, I've done that. I've like, okay, I'm going to read at 200 words a minute and see how it sounds. It's not as pleasant to listen to. And if you're a student reading that fast out loud, we read faster in our head than we do out loud. It's hard to to hold it all in unless you're incredibly high. The nonsense words is the first step into meeting that benchmark. So we see some gains. We see some gains when you're looking at CBM. It's grade level to grade level, but it's slow. That I'm really proud of the nonsense words growth, but I think what it tells us is we need to spend more time working on that reading fluency, getting kids in books. So we spend a lot of time in that structured literacy piece. That's a lot of the phonics, which is great. We need to do that, but we need to carry it over into the authentic text. The passages aren't all decodable. So what do you do when you come across a word you can't decode? So we need to spend a little bit more time in those texts. And I do know that that is one thing that the buildings are working on. What are the strategies we're going to use? How do we incorporate more reading time? Really solid reading time for kids to have that practice.
Okay, thank you. And then I just have one other question about table 1. So my question is really pertaining to growth over time, and it kind of looks like in particularly 5th and 7th grade that growth is plateauing a little bit, and I wonder when do we expect that number, and I know right at a certain age, right, they will drop off, but will we ever expect to see this percentage move up into like the 60s?
When you look at the growth that the 2nd grade and the 3rd grade had, then one would hope that by the time they get to 5th grade, that group's just going to continue to grow. And if we have 56% of our 4th graders right now, is it 4th grade? I've got to look at my colors. If we have 56%, then hopefully that continues to grow, and next year you'll see that 60% in 5th grade. But I'm going to point out something that I discovered when I was looking at these colors. So if you look at 5th grade, they dropped. They had 57% of their students last year in 4th grade, but 51 this year. You see that? They went down. So at 4th to 5th, they go down. Last year's did the same thing. When they went 4th, they actually stayed the same. So let me look at a different grade level. There are several grade levels. If it was 4th to 5th and it went down, then last year's grade level did the same thing. So it makes you start to think, is the benchmark on the assessment at a different level? Is there some change in that assessment? Because we noticed that as well in, I gotta look at my grade levels again. If you look at 8th grade, we go 50 to 48% this year. Well, last year they went 56 to 54. So there seems to be a pattern on several of the assessments where if one cohort went down, the next cohort also goes down. And that doesn't quite correlate. Now, could it be instruction? Could it be the resource? Are there pieces that are missing? Yes. I do know that there's a lot with the HMH, and teachers have spent a lot of time trying to narrow that down so they can spend more time in the skill level. Because if you do everything that's there, you are teaching at the surface level, and that's very difficult for kids to master. So I would like to guarantee that since we had so many grow in 4th grade this year, that next year we'll see that 60, but there's not. But I would hope there's good growth happening at those lower levels.
My concern is, and like I've said before, that we still end up with like 50% of the kids are not post-secondary ready, and that's my concern, right? But the growth is good.
Yes. We look like a bell curve here in Emporia, which is how norms are set. We look like a bell curve. Most of our grade levels are right around the 50th percentile. So that's better than looking like a low bell curve, but yeah, we would like to get higher than that. I'm always cautious about that because if every district gets where kids are way up there, then when they norm again, all of a sudden the benchmarks go way up, and all of a sudden your data looks completely different again. So that's just a caution, but we're like a bell curve right now.
I had a question. So the PSYOP, is that focused on reading, or is it for math?
It is for everything. So sheltered instruction are strategies to support second language learners, and it does focus on vocabulary. It focuses on listening skills, oral language, and writing, but it carries over into any content areas. It should support them in science. It should support them in music. It should support them in social studies, and that's why every teacher in the district is getting the training. And that's why the buildings they have a mapped out plan for modules that their trainers, every building has teacher trainers, are going to provide. It's a 2 to 3 year process to get through all the modules, but it should impact every content area.
And I can't remember where it was at when I was sifting through this, but I felt like there was by elementary school, kind of their priorities maybe. And I saw some had SIOP, but some didn't. And I didn't know if that was just they hadn't had the training yet or.
No, so in June, every building had teachers that became the SIOP trainers. They spent a week down here, and they learned how to be the trainer. They learned about the modules. They mapped out with their principals, when are we going to do those modules. So where you saw that is in the list of building professional development. And each building, you should, throughout the year, as we do the quarterly reports, see that pop up on all of the buildings, because now that's what, they're taking that and doing it in their buildings. So everybody, all the trainers have been trained. Now it's just the buildings mapping it out, and when do we work that into our schedules?
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about math. We only have 3 tables in this section. So, but we're talking about math. Our first table is going to be table number 10 on page 6. And I'm going to point out some information on this chart for you. You guys all there? Okay. So we had a number of grade levels improve from fall of 23 to 24 by cohort. That's the diagonal. That's the colored diagonals that we do. So you can see that 3, 6, and 7, 9, and 10 increased there, which is good growth. Teachers did some great work with those students at their cohorts. I do want to point out grade 3 and grade 10, however. Grade 3 improved by 8 percent points, and grade 10 improved by 6. So that is pretty good growth. Our teachers did a lot of great work in that. Now, I also want to point out to you the next table, on table 11 on page 7. And that table deals with our English language learners. And this time, I'm just going to talk about grade level. That'd be going across the table this time. And we had a lot of grade levels improve there as well. In particular, grades 3, 4, 5, 9, 10 made a little bit bigger growth than the other ones, but there was a lot of growth within that table as well. And finally, I want to look at table 12 on page 7, which deals with student disabilities. And you can see almost every grade level made growth there. And if you look at 7, 8, and 10, they really made a lot more growth than the other ones. But like I said, there's a lot of great growth there. The teachers and the staff did a lot of good work working with the students to get that growth. And I did want to point out, when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at fall 22 to fall 24. So it's from where they were in fall 22 to fall 24. So if you look at fall 23, there may be an up there, but we're looking from fall to 24. I did want to point out that we did receive a star in graduation, Copper Star, which is good. That's really puts a lot of emphasis on the work that we're doing district-wide, because remember, graduation isn't just a high school thing, it's a district thing. So everybody's contributing to that, and we continue to grow our graduation rate there, so which is good. If you go to the next slide, I want to talk a little about some challenges. Like we talked about with other things, our teachers have a wide variety of needs and levels in their classes, and they continue to work on their tiered support and grouping kids and meeting them where they are and helping them move from point A to point B. Chronic absenteeism is getting better, but we have some charts on that down the road that I'll come back and talk to you about that, but it's still a challenge. We need to get kids to school more often, although parents are doing a great job getting them there. It's improving, but we still have some work to do there. And on the last one, like Mrs. Stanley talked about with ELA, with ELA and the approved list, we still struggle with resources because we lost some resources that we were using. And I didn't put up there, so an addition you need to make is, it's not just math resources, it's for intervention is where we struggle. It's intervention resources. So that's a piece that we probably need to pencil in there, is that it's for intervention resources. And then some of our next steps are continue to support our teachers with a math resource, bringing in PD, and this is, I think, their 3rd year with a math resource. Continue to bring that back, providing them PD and reminding them what's out there, how it's to be used, and all the different things that students have access to, particularly the online portal. Continue to have data talks, both at the building level and the district level, to identify student need. Continue to work on our tiered support to group our kids based on their needs and provide their support. And then one thing that we started doing last year was IXL. KSD provides IXL math to the districts at no charge. So we're beginning to use more and more of that across our district, which we're seeing some good usage in that as well. And we're looking to expand it a little bit more. So that's really all I have with math. What questions do you have?
Go ahead.
Since it was the last thing you mentioned, could you tell us a little bit more about what IXL Math is, please?
Okay, so IXL is an online program where students, so there's been several of them. We've had MobiMax, we've heard about that. IXL is kind of the new, or the most recent rendition of all those online math programs. It all starts with an assessment where kids come in, they take an assessment, which then identifies their needs. And then it prescribes them activities and skills to meet their needs and meet their area. IXL is a little different in terms of it has there's 6 areas that it works with in math, and specifically you can actually target those specific areas. But it's an assessment, it's prescriptive, kids can work on what the program tells them to do. One thing that's unique about IXL is that it's built, it has a lot of teacher resources, lessons, videos, things like that. And what the teachers can do is if they're working on something, say they're working on addition of fractions, with their class, they can actually go out and assign or take that lesson or those activities and push those out to students through their Google Classroom, or assign it to them so when the kids log in, they have what's called recommendations from teachers, and it pops up on their tab. It says these are the things your teachers recommend you to do. So the kids can then go on and work on that, and the teachers can monitor them. So it's an online program. It seems to be have good success. It's something that KSD is providing to us. I think it's going to be pretty good, and we're looking at doing a little bit more work with ELA on that. ELA is not free, but math is. So right now, it's an ongoing rotational thing, so we don't know right now whether or not we have it for next year for sure. They're working on it, but hopefully we'll continue to use it.
Any other questions about math? Oh, no. Okay, well, go ahead.
So I have another question, and I hope you'll bear with me while I ask this question. So we've heard a little bit about the challenges around at-risk funding and how there's, if my interpretation's correct, the legislature's really put some restrictions on what we can use at-risk funding for, and it doesn't seem to match what our needs are as a district. And so I guess my question is, let's say that we needed to buy more resources. I mean, is that sort of the thing that we have to start thinking about a little bit? And I see some people nodding behind you. But, and I'm wondering if, when can we have that conversation? What do we need to do as a school board to make up for what you might not be getting, through the at-risk funds?
Do you want me to answer, or do you guys want to? I mean, I can try. So I can try.
If it's later, I can also wait, but.
So there's a couple ways to do this. So if there's a resource that we're using and we feel like it's making a difference with our students, we can collect data on that and potentially get it added to the list. There's a way to do that. Another way to get resources is we can decide as a district we want to spend money on it. And we can allocate dollars to it and decide this is a priority to us. We think it's going to work. It isn't an at-risk funded thing, but we feel like it's important enough that we're going to do it. So we can actually allocate money to it. As far as when the conversation is going to happen, I'm not sure. Do you have an idea? Yeah, go ahead. Add away.
So, Dr. Cardula is right. We can do a request to have things added to the at-risk list. We did that last year, but you have to have 2 to 3 years of data, and that was not realistic for us to go through because we had to go through every tier log to find, okay, which students had that intervention, who didn't, what tier level they were at. And so they denied that request. And now, since our strategists are paid out of at-risk funds, they can't use those resources. They have to use approved resources or practices, or we can't pay their salaries out of the at-risk funds. So that's where the hiccup comes. We even use a portion of it to pay for teachers' salaries because they also provide interventions. So that's where the hiccup comes. So if we wanted to, because we do have resources that work, that this has really caused a problem for, and the state recognizes that. The state will tell you, if you have a resource that works, go ahead and continue to use it. However, here's the caveat. Because there were 5 restrictions, 5 categories that they had to use to identify, and some of them just, they couldn't find the information. So if we were to do that, what we would have to do is dedicate funds for those salaries, a portion of those salaries, which is the most expensive thing that we buy, in order to use the resources that are not approved on the at-risk list. That's what's making it so difficult. Another thing we can do, though, is to have the publisher, we could have the publisher reach out to KSDE. They can apply to get added, which some of them are doing. It's actually easier for them to get the data than us, and they can pull multiple school districts. So that's the other piece to that. So that's really the route we are using, is trying to get the publishers to do that for us because they have the data that we don't.
I'll just add one more thing. It feels like a setup because we keep getting more money and we keep getting more restrictions. And so it looks like we're getting these millions of dollars and we're not spending them responsibly. So we have conversations, if we had a jar for every time we talked about how we could use at-risk funds, and we get pretty creative, and we're constantly saying, well, how about this? How about that? And we really try to see how it would fit. And they spend a lot of time, strategists and instructional coaches and teaching and learning spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to pull all of this student data, and we just couldn't do it. There's just too many kids, too much data, and so how do you, and then they could deny it at the end. So know that we're working hard on that. We are open to creative ideas. It is frustrating for us as well, especially when we have resources that we know work for kids and we can't use them.
Thank you. Your description is what my perception was, so thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I have the opportunity to talk about social emotional learning. So when we look at social emotional learning and kind of that behavior and discipline focus in the district, we are very excited. If you look at table 14 on page 9, you will see there has been a decrease in discipline logs. And when we look at logging in Power School, we've done a lot of work on making that consistent across the district the last couple of years. When we do that, we are really looking at those chronic minors, which are those minor behaviors that are happening more frequently, and we're also looking at those major behaviors. So when we talk about incidences in Power School, that's really what we're talking about. So when you see those numbers, you can see that there was a decrease across the district at high school, middle school, but then really look at those elementary numbers. We have seen a drastic, a significant decrease in those. And we really are looking at that with the addition district-wide of Capturing Kids' Hearts and really the focus on that climate and culture and what we're fostering in all of our buildings across the district. We're also looking at how we are providing the supports in our classrooms. So we added the behavior specialist, which Mrs. Casey's here in the audience, but making sure that we provide training for our teachers and our staff. She's already had one training session and it was well received in the first portion of the year. We're getting ready to have our next one coming up in 2 weeks. And so really offering those trainings of, okay, we really want to dig in and we want to know those what are those tips, tricks, tools? What tools can I add to my tool belt to really help with behaviors, whether they're those chronic minors or whether they are those major behaviors that are occurring in our classrooms. We also are looking at what are those ways that we really can have those soft starts at the elementary level to get kids ready to be in the classroom and ready for that learning. Those are going extremely well, and that's part of that Capturing Kids' Hearts piece. So again, so many things to celebrate in the area of discipline and behavior and really fostering that social emotional learning in our classrooms. And Dr. Cardula is going to come up and talk about the chronic absenteeism a little bit.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about tables 18 to 20 on page 11 and 12. And that basically shows our historical perspective for our chronic absenteeism. And as you can see, the bottom row, that's the most current one. And we've made some nice decreases in chronic absenteeism. You want to think of it as a positive increase, but really we're trying to reduce that number down, and we're getting there. We're making some good progress. You can see that almost every grade is a decrease. And that's contribute that to the parents and the families for getting their kids to school. So I want to thank them for doing that. It's important for all kids to be at school so they can learn. So it's a big deal. And I think one thing that really is helping that is our CKH and making our schools more welcoming. That relationship, having a relationship with every kid is really important, and that shows that we care for them. So I want to thank the parents and the teachers for doing that.
And then that last piece on there, we did receive a Copper Star from KSDE for social emotional growth. So again, we just want to thank the principals, the staff, and the teachers at all of our buildings for that focus on our social emotional learning of our students, because it's evident that the work they're doing is paying off. As far as concerns or challenges, so we want to continue to do a lot of things, or we want to continue to do the things that we're doing really well. So if you do a lot of things, too many things, it's really hard to focus in and have the coherence and focus. So our real focus is to really do those few things really well, capturing kids' hearts, like I said, making sure that we're really focused on how we are entering those logs into PowerSchool, and we're making sure that those things are done. Our professional development, we want to make sure that we're offering those things. That came up last year, and we offered some things, and we want to continue to do that again. We will video those as well and make sure that those are available to all of our staff so they can go back and either, if they weren't able to be there at those trainings, they can go and watch it at a later time, or maybe they were there and they want that learning again, they can go back and have that other dose of that if they want. And then really just making sure that we are looking again at that chronic absenteeism and making sure that we have that as a focus of, if they're not at school, why are they not at school? What are those ways that we can really use our district support liaison to help with those situations, to really get them to school and make sure that they know that they're valued and need to be at school to have that learning. As far as next steps, like I said, we're going to continue training. We know that we need to offer training and that it's not a one and done situation. It's really an ongoing training piece for our staff. And then we will continuing that work with Capturing Kids' Hearts. We have some traction days coming up where we get to join the Capturing Kids' Hearts people and really go out into our district and see the wonderful things that are happening. And then, like I said, that logging piece. So we've been doing these, and it's exciting to see that the work we are doing has shown growth, and a decrease in this area is growth for us. Questions?
Are there any questions?
I do think it's really awesome for the elementary, if you look at the 23, and to see that every single cohort went down
Yes.
the next year. So whatever we did in that school year made an
Yes.
impact, and I can't wait to see where we end up.
Yep, absolutely.
In 25, yeah.
And we've seen, we know we have pockets, like kindergarten, it typically is the grade that we have some that just kind of flare up, and it's because of that exposure. Typically it's because of that exposure piece. They haven't been in school, they have that lack of exposure, they just don't know how to school yet. And so we've been out, Jennifer, Mrs. Casey's been out a lot to help support, and so we know we're gonna have those pockets. And so we will work through those, but to see those drastic decreases is something to really celebrate.
Yeah, I really noticed that last year's 8th grade to this year's 9th grade, because I think when we had our study session on this topic, I think we sort of noticed some of those middle grades, and so I was really happy to see that decrease as well.
Art, did you have a question? Okay. I just had a question about chronic absenteeism. So I love that we are seeing the numbers decrease. My question is about interventions with high school students. So I know a lot of the conversation that we've had about this in the past is making sure that parents know that this is really important, and I think that more directly applies to students that aren't driving themselves to school. And I wonder what other more specific or targeted conversations we've had, particularly with 10th and 11th graders about this.
I know we talked with the high school about that a little bit, and one thing that the high school is seeing, they are seeing an increase in tardies. As far as specific conversations about interventions, we haven't really talked about that much, but we can certainly do that and try to figure out more of, get an idea of more what they're doing to try to increase that. I don't have a clear answer for that right now. Sorry.
No, that's okay. As you guys might know, I'm working on a graduate program right now in education finance, and we were actually talking about this in one of my classes, that a lot of school districts have come up with financial incentives for students. And I didn't know if that was, I'm not suggesting that, I just didn't know, like, just because it had come across my radar lately, if that was something that you all had heard of as well.
I just read an article, I was telling Dr. Harder before we started about Massachusetts high school that I had heard about earlier this year that offers recess now, and that their absenteeism went from 35% to 23% from one school year to the next. And it was in that article, there are also references to schools that are offering cash. And I don't know how you ever make that work, because, we got to pay people who teach. So I don't know, but I did think the recess thing was really interesting.
Thank you.
Good evening. I have the opportunity to visit with you about the district communication plan, and we'll talk a little bit about Parent Square and some of the things that that's doing for us as far as the communication across the district and that sort of thing as well. So the district communication plan is Appendix C, and we first documented all of our communication plans in October of 2023, so it's right at a year. There were all things that we were doing previously, but not documented in one spot. And so by doing that, I feel like that's definitely increased and had a strength across the board as far as communication with staff, families, all of those sorts of things as well. There's 42 different tactics in there that all have subsets and that sort of thing too. And so we can track those as far as the timeline, any costs that those are, and then that measurement as well. And so that measurement is a key part, is what we're doing working. Are people opening the emails? Are people getting that information and that sort of thing? And striving to try to continue and to increase those kinds of things as well. So definitely a strength of that is that communication plan. Also with Parent Square, which we initiated this summer, helping to address the challenges. It's a unified platform across for all of our teachers, all of our families, and so that's definitely a strength of that communication part of it as well. And it also ensures the accessibility to our families through the app, through email, text, those sort of things. It's kind of interesting to go back and look at the information. And phone is actually a very small portion of that communication part of it. It's text, app, email, those kinds of things. And so when I first started using it, I kind of panicked because we were doing enrollment, and that's the push to get everybody in is to call them. That's what we've always done. We weren't calling them. We didn't need to call them because we were texting them, which is how they preferred to get the information anyway. So definitely a great feature of Parent Square. Also, it makes it easier for our families with limited technology. The way that puts that information out, they can customize that, they can choose how they want to do that and how they use that information. And also that information, how that connects with Power School as well. Power School and Parent Square work together. And so by being able to do that, it definitely makes it easier for our teachers, our staff to be able to utilize that. And it's a much quicker turnaround time to be able to get those families on the Parent Square as well. And you can see, we have all the different reports, and it shows in Figure C5, how that's being used with our teachers, our parents, administrators, how they're using that, and the timely communication that happens with the Parent Square. Some of the challenges that we face is in the Appendix C as well, but just the district communication plan, there's still challenges exist with consistency, making sure with 9 buildings, different areas, different principals, different things, a way to use that, ensuring that it's consistent across the board. And so we always are working to improve that and to make that easier to do with our schools. Also, just sharing a clear and coordinated way. Each school does things just a little bit differently. Having Parent Square makes that easier to be able to do that and coordinate that, but still a challenge that we're working through as well. And then just difficulty reaching stakeholders, reaching everybody. That's something that we have always been a challenge. I feel like with Parent Square, that we're increasing that. It's getting better, but it's consistently going to be a challenge to make sure that we're reaching everybody just with that regular use of technology and some of our families that may or may not use that or have accessible technology to them. And then we always have that language barrier too. With Parent Square, it works slick, to be able to have that in Spanish, and so they're getting that in Spanish as well, but there's still just that language barrier of being able to utilize those tools and that sort of thing also. And just having those different gaps makes it, difficult across the board. Some of the next steps, we continue to address these challenges, looking at different ways to communicate and being able to use Parent Square to its full capacity. Right now, we're using 9 of the 14 components of it, which is great. We just started, July 1st or shortly thereafter. But, some next steps that we can include would be social media and web sharing, permission slips, and so just different ways to communicate, things that make it a lot easier to be able to do those kinds of things. And so there's definitely pieces of that we can continue to incorporate as we learn more about utilizing Parent Square and just what that process looks like. And then just the communication plan as well, addressing next step. Just constantly reviewing that document, updating that document, what's working, what's not working, what other pieces can we add to it as well. So any questions on that portion?
No questions?
I would just say that I've heard a lot of positive things. I haven't used it myself, but just being able to have everything in one place, and I think even people felt like more of the staff, the teachers, were using it, kind of being driven to it instead of everybody having multiple places where, one sport or one teacher might use a particular app. That kind of all in one place that they could go to get information was very helpful.
Right, absolutely. And that's what we're hearing as well. And I'll give some statistics here in a little bit that support what you've said as well. So, going on through Parent Square, just the implementing that in June of 2024, just the significant improvements in communication between schools and family. I don't really have a way to compare that to previously with, what we used with School Messenger, because it just didn't have so many of those components, and that's obviously why we went to that next step. But the volume of communication between school and home has drastically increased. The platform, it's just definitely a streamlined messaging system. And I just learned this afternoon a piece of that I didn't realize. There was a message that went out this afternoon from one of the schools, and I was working with Stephanie Murray, and she gets all of those messages because she's one of the administrators. And we noticed that she got the message, but she only got it by email, and she opened it immediately, but she didn't get it by text, or she didn't get it by the other methods. We're like, oh, wait, is there a problem? No, there's a hierarchy of how that works. So because she opened the email almost instantly, it didn't need to send the other parts of it. So, like I said, we just learned that this afternoon. I was like, hey, that's a great feature. That's a nice opportunity, because we don't, we want you to get the message, but once you've gotten it once, you don't need it the second or third time or that sort of thing. So just some great features like that as well. And just the ability also for our teachers to share two-way messaging and the ability to share photos, videos, that sort of thing. Just an example of that, Maria Diaz, who is our community relations secretary, has a student in the 3-year-old preschool program. She's getting photos and videos of her child in that morning's preschool class that she would never have gotten to see otherwise. And so, she comes in with a smile. She's like, hey, look what he's doing. He's doing what he's supposed to, those kinds of things. And so our parents, she's an employee and a parent, but she's getting that from both sides. And just the utilization of that tool is definitely connecting and building those partnerships across the board. So just some quick examples of that too. And this is data just from August to about a week and a half ago when I pulled the information. But 23,821 direct messages have been sent to 6,599 threads. So that's across the district. That's, almost 24,000 different messages back and forth that have been sent across that, which is amazing, which wasn't happening before. And I looked at it again this afternoon just to compare to see what that looks like. There's been an additional 5,000 direct messages sent since I pulled this a week and a half ago. So it's just amazing the amount of communication that's happening. 2,065 posts have been shared. 2,208 photos and videos have been shared, which to me is just amazing. They're staggering numbers to have that kind of communication across the board. One of the other things that this points out are what you can use with Parent Square is 97% of our families are contactable. That's pre-K through 12th grade. So 97%, which is huge. And so you're like, okay, wait, what about that 3%? Or, what's the hang up with that? That typically runs into our homeless or our foster students or things like that, just that small disconnect of that. But like I said, 97% across the board are contactable. 43% of our parents have downloaded the app. And then 66% of our families are interacting. So, to me, those are huge. We talk about the language barriers, we talk about the different things, but we still have 66% of our families that are engaging and working with, our teachers and with our staff for that as well. See, just some challenges. I'll talk just a little bit about challenges for that. So Parent Square has definitely improved communication, and we've seen the results of that. But there was some confusion when we rolled this out this summer. We were also working very hard to enroll our students. We changed enrollment drastically as far as what that looked like. So for enrollment, we were asking all of our families to make sure that they had a Power School parent portal. Then we were also telling them to download the app for Parent Square. So there was some confusion with that with our families because like, oh, wait, I already did that. I enrolled. Yes, you did that, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much. But here's another thing that will help improve communication, that sort of thing. So just working through some of those challenges, and just that navigation piece. For the most part, Parent Square is very easy to navigate, but if you're not used to technology, if you're not used to doing something like that, there can definitely be some challenges through that. And then just ensuring that our parents have that accessibility to technology and feeling comfortable using that. That's just an ongoing challenge. And then we continue to make efforts to provide support and resources to our family to utilize that tool. Over conferences, we had flyers and things at each of the buildings so they could grab that QR code. They could go ahead and get enrolled in it if they weren't. There's tools there to help that, and just continuing to do those kinds of things to help our families be able to use that particular tool. Next steps for that, just to enhance communication by providing ongoing training to our staff, to our families, being able to do all those different communications such as the posts, the alerts, the notices, remaining centralized for that Parent Square consistency. And so we continue to strive for that and continue working through some of those processes as well. We also are engaging, monitoring the engagement, what that looks like, how many of our students our families are using it, how many of our teachers are using that, and what that looks like to continue increasing that communication, because that only bolsters and helps what we're trying to do. It helps with our absenteeism. It helps with, all of those different kinds of things that we've been talking about this evening throughout that whole strategic plan. And so this only bolsters that and helps those kinds of things as well. We're going to continue to encourage them to download the app. One of the things, there was a little bit of misconception too, is people like, oh, they don't have the app, so they're not getting it, or we're not enrolled in Parent Square. Not true at all. Everybody then enrolled, had to put in a phone number, had to put in an email address, and that's so you're automatically in there. You're then there. You're getting it, but it's how you get it and the convenience of getting it by using that app. And so that's one of the things that we want to continue to, make it accessible for everybody and use it how they want to and how they want to receive the information. So I think that's all I have. Is there any questions?
I have one quick question. First, I love the discovery you made today. I mean, I love when technology is smart like that and can figure out that they don't have to call, text, and email.
Right.
So one question I have is, because this technology is so smart, and I love that, is it possible to see when maybe a caregiver hasn't opened a message, so that way maybe the teacher could say, oh, wow, this message isn't open, just to allow for some kind of follow-up?
Yeah, absolutely. I need to dig into that a little bit deeper, but I feel like based on all of the reporting and all the information that is available through Parent Square, I believe that would be possible, but I would want to check just to make sure and see at what capacity. Is it just the administrators that can see it? Is it the individual teacher that can see it? But we can dive into that a little bit more there and see just to make sure that that is accessible to everybody.
Yeah, it could be, I'd hate to put more burden on teachers, but
Sure.
also it can be helpful to know if a message
Right,
has been
absolutely.
opened
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
I think I'm the first. Go to the next slide. Okay, childcare classrooms. We are in our second year, And it took a lot of work to get in there, to develop those, and we had a great child care committee. So we have 4 classrooms, Logan, Village, Jones, and Walnut, and they're all full, and we have a waiting list. So we have 2 toddlers and 3 infants. You can see the graph over there, the table about the supervisor, how much it costs us. We knew when we went into this endeavor that it would not be cost neutral, and that we would always have to pay more, but we also knew that there were staff members that were not going to be able to come to work unless we had childcare. So you can see the cost revenue there. Current cost is $724,248 a year. And so we did talk originally when we were looking at adding rooms that that was the goal, but then once we were able to start developing them and how much with KDHE, all the different regulations, realized that really maybe we need to see how 4 classrooms work. And we're also very grateful for that Little Lions. They're getting that going, and so there's another option there. So we also have staff pay for childcare, so the revenue at $135 per week is approximately $169,290 a year. So challenges continue. It is expensive. It is expensive, but it is also beneficial. Staff members, when you talk to them, they love it. Staffing 10-hour workdays. So originally, when we talked about this, we talked about staff overlapping, maybe starting early, ending a little bit earlier, having another staff member start a little later, end a little bit later. But really, it's been the 10-hour workdays. And when Pam and Samantha have talked about, so Samantha Estrada and Pam Stranathan have talked to them, my understanding is that they want to keep the 10-hour days. So it's a challenge to staff them, but then also they appreciate being able to work that. And then we just continue to review the cost to the district budget. It is expensive, and then continue to gauge staff needs. So it is helpful to have those. The other area that we looked at is looking at athletic coaching participation. So this was something that Pam did in a previous district. And so you will look at the coach and participant ratio. And so this is the fall. There was also some information that was sent, my understanding, from last year for a different season, but right now we want to look at the current fall season. So you can see where we are at with Emporia, so in comparison to other districts our size in our league. So you can, oh, that's okay. Quick trigger. So we have, football, that we're right in the middle as far as where we have the coach to participant. You can also see how many students that we have going out in comparison to other districts. Okay. So I'm going to step aside, have Mr. Giffen share some strengths.
Right. Good evening. I'd like to visit just a little bit about some of the efforts we're making as far as recruiting and retaining our staff, and also a little bit about safety and security. So I'll start first with just some recruitment and retention efforts that we've had going on so far this year. Our staff has been out at, I said 6, I think there's 1 or 2 more now that I'm thinking about it, events that we've been to since school has began, and those are kind of outlined in specifically on page 15 of the lengthy document. Some others we've got coming up include our Emporia State Fair, which is on November 6th. That's always a good one for us to attend. We always get a good turnout there and meet a lot of individuals who have an interest in our district. It's by far the best one that we attend. We also have something as far as retention of staff. Our wellness program is tracked through WellSteps. We've got some great things going on, including Dr. Thomas's Lunch and Learns that take place on Tuesday evenings here. We get a group in, and some of her students come and present on various topics, which is well attended. So those are just a few of the ideas that we have with our wellness program. There's lots of others as far as healthy eating, as far as community activities that people can participate in to earn points, and ultimately those points lead to different levels of prizes that they can earn throughout the year. So it's just a little retention strategy that we have, and we have some good turnout. We've got actually 512 people signed up in the system this year, which is more than we have ever had. Doesn't mean everyone's using it, but we do have a lot of people signed up and have the availability to participate in the program. The third bullet down there talks about our fall vacancy report. Last year in 2023, we reported 41 vacancies in the district. This year, we only had 33 to report. And those are more specifically outlined on page 16 of the full report, if you want to take a look at just what some of those specific areas are. Another item there is our increase in the contribution from the district toward single health insurance premium. That went up to $580 for a single premium and $630 for an employee plus premium. And also our increases in insurance premiums was less for next year than we've seen in previous years. So that percentage was less, which is good for our employees who use that health insurance program. Another thing that we're doing, we're continuing to update our job descriptions. There are a lot of them. I didn't realize that we had so many, but we're developing those. We're trying to condense some as well that are the same in language, but just trying to be more efficient in that manner. And then also, as we continue to implement our Frontline Central program that we purchased last year, we're just looking at how we can best use that to be most efficient in our onboarding and our orientation systems, and also how we can be more efficient with all of our programs in the Frontline, which includes recruiting and hiring, our professional growth, and also absence management. We've got 4 different platforms that we use within Frontline. So that's going pretty well for us. I think all of the folks that are using it are seeing the benefits. It's helping streamline some things from the employee standpoint, so that's been a plus for us in implementing that this year. As far as challenges, we knew coming into this fall that there were already several student teachers that we have in Emporia that have been offered jobs when they came to us for next fall already. I've talked to several other students out at career fairs that, yep, they're booked up and already have something for next fall. So that's a challenge not only for us, but for any district that's out there. We know that once they go out to somewhere to student teach, that many times they're in the same boat we are, and they're trying to hire the same folks we are. The format also of some of the career fairs recently has changed. Some of them have stopped offering some of the interview portion of that. It's really just more of a meet and greet, and at this point, all I'm doing at those is collecting names and continuing to just reach out to those folks and say, hey, we're still interested. Where are you at in your program? How are you doing? Is there anything we can do to get you to Emporia? So I'm growing that list, and we'll just continue to reaching out to those folks just to continue letting them know that we do have an interest. Staff turnover is a trend in many districts. I was just at the Community Preparedness Committee last week, which has multiple agencies from Emporia meeting, and almost every one of them was just talking about how difficult it is to keep up with staff turnover, no matter what business or agency you might be in. So our next steps continue just to reaching out to folks. We're hosting, we haven't done this in a while, but we're hosting a student luncheon for our student teachers on November 1st. We're going to bring them in after that PLT day, just again to try and reach out and make that personal connection with them. When positions do come open, we're trying to establish some firm timelines so that our communication with candidates who are applying is more clear, and they know when application periods close. It's a little more difficult when we've got para positions because those are always open, but as other positions come open, we're really trying to talk to principals and others who are hiring about getting us the timelines that they would like to hire. We're also examining our hiring processes just to meet the changing needs. Our elementary principals, we've used, I think, every format under the sun, and those 6 folks, and including Jones, are vying for the same candidates. And we've really tried to do as much group interviewing as we can, but that takes time to coordinate all of that. If they know they've got folks in their building right now that we need to get hired, they've got the freedom to do that. And we want to just to keep encouraging them to reach out to those candidates, and they may know people in other districts who have an interest in coming back that they've maintained a relationship with that's been good for us as well. So just trying to stay on top of all of that and do everything we can to let folks know we're interested. So questions you might have about recruitment, retention?
Our education colleges like Emporia State, for a while, graduates who were in the education field had fallen quite low. Is there are you seeing an increase of that, or are they saying?
I know exactly what you're talking about. I think they're seeing that gradually increase. We're still seeing candidates, although the ones we're seeing at career fairs are primarily underclassmen, freshmen, sophomores, because a lot of the older juniors and seniors already have jobs and they don't even have to attend. I just wrote a letter for one today that we've hired that doesn't have to attend their career fair. So it's a tough market because everybody's trying to hire the same teachers. I think they're slowly starting to see that increase. Very happy to say our teaching and training pathway at the high school with Laura Swin, I think they had 9 students in that pathway just a couple of years ago. Now they're up in the 20s, like 28. So it's good to see that interest coming back, even at the high school level, and encouraging those students to continue in those programs. Good question.
Did you say that there was a list in here of which positions are currently open, like of those 33?
I don't think it's the ones that are currently open. Let me
I guess
jump to
it
that
kind
real
of
quick.
specifies. Yeah. I was more wondering about, are any of these like the hard to fill positions, the ones that are open? I'm assuming they are.
I think we're talking about every position being hard to
Right,
fill
yeah.
right now, but
But the traditionally hard to fill roles.
right. Special education is always an area of need for us. We do have quite a few contracted speech and language pathologists.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we contract and those positions are filled, we still have to report them as a vacancy.
Right.
So what's in the report are actually the vacancies that we had to report.
Okay.
And there's different criteria for that. I know we pulled some numbers just yesterday on like alternate licensure or long-term subs in our district. We've got 8 people currently that are on a waiver, but most of them have either a professional or an initial license. They're just working towards licensure in another area where we have to waiver them.
Right.
We've got 17 long-term subs in positions, and many of those are special education. I think there were 11 alternate route licenses that we had issued, and then 2 temporary non-renews, which are kind of the alternate route as well.
Okay. I was just wondering what sort of, for some of those, particularly special education, I know we have the apprenticeship program, but what other incentives are we doing to target some of those really hard to fill roles?
Great question. I know Mrs. Glade says, and she can give you a lot of information. I think we talked about that Patterson grant recently. In addition to that, and I'll let Tara explain more of that, our special education teachers receive a $2,000 stipend each year just for having their caseload. It's some of that additional time. We also have a few positions that are really hard to fill that we offer kind of a market-driven stipend for.
Okay.
That's based on a percentage.
Okay. Well, no, that was exactly the answer that I was looking for. No, but Tara, I'd love to hear from you too.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to say, yeah, you guys, I believe it was August 24th maybe that you approved us receiving that Patterson grant. So we were thrilled to be able to try and alleviate some of that financial burden. What we're finding out is that that traditional pathway of the teacher or the special education teacher is almost obsolete, and the state is doing so many things to open up pathways to the classroom. We have some fantastic staff members who didn't start out as teachers who are now seeking their education to become special education teachers. And I was just on a special education webinar. We're not the only people who are having the issues. I believe last year in the state of Kansas, special ed vacancies were around 280. This year, we're over 400. So that is unfortunate, but we're going to keep trying. And I feel like we really do have a nice scaffolding of support around those people, but that's another conversation. So thank you for your question.
Thank you for the backup.
Have we heard anything else? I know there's been some scuttlebutt in the last couple of years from the legislature suggesting that they might pay student teachers to make that burden less for them. I think that if that ever happened, they would probably make us do that. You know what I mean? Like they'd be like, now we're paying student teachers, but honestly, they wouldn't give us any money and then we would have to figure it out. I just wondered if anybody had heard anything more about that because I can think of a girl I work with at the bank who specifically told me she is not going to college anymore because she cannot afford to not work while she's student teaching. And I'm sure that's the case for a lot of young people. My kid's lucky because she lives at home still and I still cook for her. So, yeah.
Great points. I haven't heard anything from the state level about paying student teachers. I know many districts do. They're particularly out in western Kansas, and that's how they get them in the door. They're going to pay them to be there, whether it's some housing. And we have to be careful saying paying student teachers, because right now you can't pay them, you can give them a stipend or housing. There's a lot of intricacies to that, but I think more and more districts are starting to pick up on that, but it is a financial cost that we would have to weigh. Right now, we're doing okay. I would certainly love to have more folks to be able to fill this, more qualified folks to fill in these special ed roles and any of the open positions that we have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one last question about the Patterson grant, and maybe I should have asked this back in August. So do we have it for 3 years or for 4 years?
So I believe it is 3 years.
Okay.
So we're working with the business department to figure out a way that we will disperse those grants.
Okay.
Since it is reimbursement, we do have to have some documentation from
yeah.
our grant award recipients that show that they have had these, they have accrued these educational costs and then paid them, and then we can provide that reimbursement to
Right.
them.
Yeah. I was just confused because it says that there's a final report 4 years after the disbursement.
Right. So
Yeah.
we do have to report about,
Okay.
and I foresee us reporting on teacher retention. I'm hoping that this is helping us to retain, especially some of those special education teachers that might be the beneficiaries of some of this grant money. But we have about 30 individuals who will potentially receive some grant funds. About 19 of those are special education teachers, and 11 are general education teachers who are currently in pursuit of additional licensure. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah. It's great. Thank you, Tara.
Another quick thing I just happened to think of that we do offer as an incentive is tuition reimbursement. For those teachers, it was originally designed for those teachers teaching dual credit at the high school level, which was difficult and hard to fill at that time. But special education is also an area. Those that are on a waiver can apply for tuition reimbursement as long as they provide us the information. In fact, our committee will be meeting here soon to divvy up the money that's available for that. Okay, the next piece that I have is on a little bit of the efforts we have on safety and security. A lot's been going on here and will continue to happen. Our local emergency planning committee meets quarterly down at the sheriff's office, and there are, again, all agencies of Emporia and Lyon County represented at that. But Southern Star Gas Service actually came in and did a presentation for us. I didn't realize how extensive their outreach was, but they have almost 6,000 miles worth of gas lines, and many hundreds of those are right here in Kansas, and several miles of gas line are right here in Lyon County. So that was kind of an interesting conversation to hear them have. Another thing that we always encourage schools to do after they have a crisis drill or something like that is to debrief. Well, if you'll remember our first day of school, we had about 5 inches of rain and no power at the middle school and lots of other stuff going on. But when I stopped by the middle school after they got the lights back on, their team was already meeting to talk about what went well, what could they do better next time this happens. So it's just the importance of those debriefs and reviewing those things and talking about next steps. So it was great to see their team already engaged in that just minutes after the kids got back in and school got started. The high school also bought an additional, what they call wet bulb technology. They already had one, but they wanted an additional one. But what that does is measures the dangerous humidity levels for those, especially those outdoor practices. So they're able to take those readings, before practices start in the afternoon or in the mornings. They're sharing that information with the middle school just so everyone is on the same page and watching out for our students and our coaches who are out there in those more dangerous conditions. In September, there was an online school and safety and security summit. It was a long couple of days, but there were some very interesting sessions, and some of it was on mental health of our youth and adults, but also the use of social media and how it's really turned into a negative thing. I think we've experienced some of that not only locally, but statewide with some of the swatting calls and also nationwide. So those were just a few of the topics that were involved in that online school safety summit. Our District Safety and Security Committee met on September 24th. There are some topics that we reviewed again in the report on page 17. We did, thank goodness, hire our 3rd District Security Officer. Brian Anstey's been a great addition. I was able to go around to several schools with him that first week he started. I think he was at a board meeting. He'll be attending some high school events, but he's been really great about just soaking it all in. We were looking for someone that met our qualifications to hire. Although we would have liked to have had someone that was armed, Brian's had many years of service in working with different types of security issues in his former job, so we were very happy to get him on board with his knowledge and background. Actually, three of us, and Brian was one of them, went to this Incident Command System, or ICS, or National Incident Management System training up at ESU last week. It was a really good overview of what both of those systems were. I know he and the other attendee really got some great information out of it that just talks about our systems and how we operate in the event of an emergency. That last item there is just emergency preparedness training. We're constantly doing that, but we'll be attending an event. Actually, three of us are going to an event next week that talks about emergency preparedness for larger scale events like sporting events or field days at an elementary school. So we're excited to learn more there and bring that back to each of our schools. As far as challenges, obviously, again, I mentioned it earlier, the social media, the safety-related posts. We do take all of those seriously if they happen here, no matter where they're at. So those have been difficult to track because they do take an immense amount of time and resources to be able to try and make sure things are safe in our schools. Responding to unpredictable situations. What just happened today at the high school, where it was kind of an unexpected road closure out in front of the high school, which kind of closed their main exit and entrance. But I think things went fantastic out there. The high school had a great plan. The maintenance department came over and offered assistance in directing traffic. The kids got out of there in probably a more timely fashion than maybe they do on their own. So it was great to watch the team in action work through that. Parent Square was used at the high school, also the middle school, just to let them know, hey, traffic's probably going to be backed up more than normal, but things worked out well. The other challenge, again, up to this point was just our two security officers being stretched thin among all the schools, so Brian's really brought a relief to that. As far as next steps, again, just making sure those three are working together. I know he's scheduled to go out and shadow with the gentleman at the high school and the middle school just to see what their roles are out there and continue training for him. And then just continue training on our incident command systems and getting everyone to think about the larger events when they might have some other folks in their building, whether it's a grandparent day or a field day or something like that going on. Just what would they do in the event of an emergency there. Are there questions about safety and security? All right, I bored you enough. Thank you.
And finally, we're going to talk about professional development and resources. We've also included enrollment information in this area because it is what our finances are based on, and we need those finances for professional development and resources. So if you turn to page 18, that's where you will start seeing the list of all of the professional development that's been offered throughout August and September. The first table, table 21, lists out the mandated trainings. There are mandated trainings from the state. It is a lot, which is one of the reasons we have so many days of professional development in August, because most of those have to be conducted before the end of August or by September 2nd. You'll also see there are a few that are mandated trainings by the district, BLT, our wellness, and this year we did include Parent Square because we really wanted our staff to know how to use that. You'll also see on page 19, it continues that table, the other district initiatives that we've continued to provide professional development on. We had our Capturing Kids' Heart, our Recharge. We've got first and second year teacher training continuing throughout the year. CPI, that crisis prevention intervention, that's a training that happens in the evening that's to help diffuse situations with students. And then you'll see a nice little list of professional development that has been provided by Jennifer Casey, our behavior specialist. And that's all in August and September. And I actually got to attend one that she did with the Boys and Girls Club a couple weeks ago. It was a 90-minute presentation. And all of a sudden I looked up and the 90 minutes was finished. and I couldn't believe the 90 minutes was finished. I've been in a lot of presentations, so she does an amazing job. They were very engaged, and it's great to be able to work with that group as well. So very, very grateful to have her. You'll see in Table 22 the professional development that the buildings have provided, and that's where you've seen the PSYOP, the training that they've done that's specific to their buildings for their school improvement plans, but also the professional development that they're providing to support our district initiatives. And then we also included in Table 23 some of the workshops and conferences that we've been able to send people to since August began. I noticed today there's a couple that are missing, so we'll make sure we add those to the next time we share this report. Some challenge, I have to talk about the enrollment as well. So that's going to go into the challenges. Go ahead. It's all right, Casey. Let me just really confuse you. So that the challenges, we've already talked about the evidence-based practices and how that's affected our math interventions, so it's very difficult to provide that resource. We are really focusing in on that science this year. We are going to provide full-time instructional coaches for the elementary level. That's been a challenge the last few years, but our staff have been very vocal about we need those people here. We need them all day. And with the increase of new teachers or teachers on alternate route, that's really a need all the way across the board. So that's been a challenge for the buildings in meeting those needs, that particularly elementary. Our K-12 enrollment has decreased, and you will see that on Table 25 of page 22. We've lost 87 students. I say lost, but we know we've also gained, but we are down 87 students this year. If you look at figure 3 on page 23, you'll also see that the number of students that are receiving free meals continues to increase. So that group of at-risk students continues to increase for the district. If you look at figure 4 on page 24, that's the number of students that are receiving support as second language learners, and that has also increased. The difference this year compared to years in the past, our funding's been based on minutes. So essentially, if a student is with a teacher that has his or her second language endorsement, then we receive funding for every minute that they were with that teacher. This year, because of our numbers, we actually are going to receive funding based on the number of students we have that are receiving services. So that will actually bring in more money to us. So the state is very generous in that area. They utilize either the number of students or the minutes, whichever one brings you in the most money, that's the one we get to use. This is the first time we will actually have it based on head count. And then the biggest challenge we've seen with enrollment is in career and technical education. And that was really out of our hands. Last year, we had a new requirement for high school for personal finance. The state does not recognize personal finance as a career and technical ed course, but that took the place of consumer and personal finance, which was a required class for our high school students. So that's how we got quite a bit of our money, because it was a required course. But the state decided that that could not count as personal finance, and no longer would it be a funded CTE course. So that impacted our minutes greatly. So we knew that was going to happen. This is the first year to see how far that dropped. So that is going to impact the funding a little bit. As we look at next steps, we're going to continue our resource adoption for science. So we hope to come to you in the spring with some recommendations for science resources. It won't quite look the same as the math and the ELA, because there really isn't one that goes pre-K-12. And elementary had pretty much been trying something out and is pretty satisfied with what they have. We're just going to take the burden off the buildings. So we're really focusing on secondary resources at this time. We'll continue our research on best practices for our students who need that second language support. And we're going to fill those 2 positions of instructional coaches, with the caveat that we have to fill all of our classrooms, but we are going to fill those positions. So those are our next steps. What questions do you have for me? Because I think we forgot to put a question slide there. Are you adding to me?
No, we're doing the conclusion, and then we're
And
going
then
to add-
asking,
yes,
okay,
yeah,
all right.
Yes. So as our third quarterly report, we learn every time we do a quarterly report. So the first time, we put a lot of the tables in the slides, and that was too much. And so then we changed that a little bit, and so we think we're getting closer to a sweet spot. One thing that we do really want to highlight is to thank each of the board members, because we could not have our ELA resources, our math resources, CKH, staffing, childcare classrooms, everything that we talk about, it happens right here. So we just want to say thank you for all of that. And so there will be, sometimes when you hear about a strategic plan, they'll say, well, that's something that you put together and then it just sits on a shelf. And we don't do that. We keep it alive, we keep it in front of us. We have our panels up here. I was just talking to Rotary yesterday, that we keep it in front of us, so whenever we project, it's always right there. But then we also are very committed to making sure that you have very current information about what's happening in each of those areas. So, our upcoming, December will be more of a look back for January through December, so it'll be a little bit different, and then March will continue that same kind of cycle, but we will have that study session for state assessments. So what questions would you have about the professional development or anything?
No questions? Okay.
I mean, we've had so many great reports on CKH and PSYOP and all the other things already this year that you've answered them all.
Yeah. And thank you all for taking this time to really put everything together. We really appreciate all the hard work that goes into this report. Thank you. Okay, I need to get my board docs back to the right thing. Hold on. Yes, okay. The next item is an executive session, item 9A.
I will make a motion to enter executive session for 20 minutes to discuss confidential student information pursuant to the exception relating to actions adversely or favorably affecting a student under coma. Superintendent Allison Harder and Director of Assessments and Accountability, Dr. Ryan Karjla, are invited to join the session. KASB Attorney Luke Soba is also invited and will be available by phone if needed. And I believe that when we return from this, action will be anticipated.
And I forgot to put on there what time we will return, so would you
Oh,
mind
8
adding
o'clock,
that
20
again?
minutes.
Thank you.
Time for the bathroom, yeah.
Second.
Okay, thank you.
So moved. That was a fast one. Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, I will take the resolution.
I move that the Board of Education adopts Resolution 2024-15 to modify the extended term suspension as recommended by the hearing officer and affirmed by the appellate hearing officer.
A second.
Okay.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you. Okay, future board calendar dates. On Tuesday, November 12th, at 8 a.m., the steering committee is having their workshop here at Mary Herbert Education Center. And then also that evening, on the evening of the 12th at 5 p.m., there is the steering committee community engagement session. Wednesday, November 13th at 8 a.m., the steering committee will have their follow-up workshop at the City of Emporia offices. And then that evening at 6 p.m. will be our next regular board meeting. Oh,
So sorry, that was my mistake, to add the study session at 5 p.m.
no worries. Wednesday, November 13th, starting at 5 p.m., we'll have a study session, and then our regular meeting at 6 p.m. November 15th through the 17th, we will be in Wichita for the KASB annual convention. And then our next regular board meeting after that will be December 11th at 6 p.m., followed by the January board meeting, January 8th at 6 p.m. here at Mary Herbert Education Center. Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
I know. I don't like that you started putting January on there.
Motion passes 7-0.